Okay, Unit 3.7, Costs, Revenue and Objectives. Now this is one that can involve calculations and you can be asked calculations in questions. Now, for anything with calculation, it is good to go slowly. And you must pay careful attention to detail, as some of the questions may include sources like tables or text. So let's look at costs. Now, costs are obviously the payments that the firm is making. Now, I'm going to go to fixed cost. I'm sitting in the school building, but we're not using it because we are online learning. Um, but the school must pay for electricity. Yeah. Anything if it leaves lights on for security, then you must pay for that. They are keeping the building uh, warm. Yeah. They're not wasting money. They're just keeping a little bit of warmth in so that the pipes don't burst if temperature goes below zero. They must pay the rent that they're paying for the building. Okay, now I'm going to leave the school and I'm going to let us imagine a factory. If I've got a factory, I still will have certain fixed costs. How will I recognize the fixed cost? Well, if I produce nothing, all of the costs I have will be fixed cost. So the rent would be a fixed cost. Now, once I start producing, I will, the textbook has us make teddy bears, but we've talked about baking bread before. So if I bake one bread or one batch of bread and slice it, I'm going to be using a certain amount of electricity. I'm going to be using a certain amount of labor. Um, if I make two batches, then I would be using more of electricity. If I make three batches, I would be using more of electricity. And if I'm making 3,000 batches of bread, then I would be using more of labor, much more electricity, not forgetting all the flour, the milk, the eggs, which will vary dependent on the amount of bread I make. Fixed costs and variable costs. Now, if I add the fixed cost and the variable together, I will get the total cost. If I want the average cost, I take the number of output, the number of, if I want average cost per loaf, I would take the number of loaves of bread I have made, and I will look at the total cost and I will divide the total cost by the number of loaves of bread I made and I will get an average cost. So far, nothing complicated. So again, costs that do not change with production are called fixed costs. Yeah. So there's a little factory there, and let's imagine they're making bread there. If they produce no bread, they must pay the rent. But if they make 100 loaves of bread, the rent doesn't go up. It remains the same. It remains fixed. Yeah. So if the cost is not changing with production, it is a fixed cost. They've given examples. The cost of buying a machine. It costs the same whether you use it or you don't use it. The cost of advertising. The salaries of permanent employees. Now here we've got our variable costs. If I am making more of units, then I will have more of transportation. Um, if I am making more, we'll talk about bread. I seem to be thinking a lot about bread. If I'm making more bread, I will use more electricity. Maybe it's a time when we eat more bread than usual, then we might have some temporary employees that we use to make more bread. Um, yeah, with bread is maybe not the best example, but when it's Easter time, Christmas time, any kind of holiday times, then people will take on more staff, and these will be variable costs because they relate to increases in production. I often imagine things like factories when I'm looking at costing, because the production of in factories is normally manufactured goods. Yeah, so we're producing a good, so I can imagine which are my fixed costs by saying, well, what if we produce no goods? Yeah, it's very simple. And if I'm making 1,000 loaves of bread, then there will be an additional cost. So I can say that my total cost is my fixed cost plus my variable cost. Now imagine I get in a question the information of the total cost and the information of the total variable cost, then I can establish the total fixed cost. Alternatively, if I have a diagram, yes, when I look at the unit 0, I will establish my fixed cost. Now, if I want to make average cost, I take my total cost and I divide it by the number of units, the amount of the output. So far, we've not learned anything complicated. I've learned that a fixed cost can be determined when my output is 0. I've learned a couple of examples of fixed costs like rent, salaries, yeah, and there will be more. The bigger the factory, the bigger the concern, the more fixed cost it might have. Yeah, but we have determined put the output to 0, and we can recognize our fixed cost. The variable cost, the next concept, is that this is the change in cost as we make something. Yeah. So in terms of output, if I make one Mask? Where's it gone? There, come to me, Mr. Mask. So I made one mask. When I'm making the mask, there's obviously some stitching going along here. There are some materials. This particular one has got a filter. It's got some elastic. Yes, and there will be a certain amount of electricity used to make this one mask. Um, if they're using an electric sewing machine, there will be a certain amount of the various materials. Yeah, and if I make two masks, I will have higher cost. Yeah, because I will have used double the amount of material. And dependent on what the cost of the materials are, that would determine my variable cost. Yeah, so if I'm making 200 masks, then my variable cost will be that much higher. Average cost, well, my total costs are my fixed cost, total fixed cost, plus my total variable costs. So I then must just divide by the output. So if a factory's made 10,000 masks, yeah, they look at the total costs, then divide it by 10,000, and then they've got their average cost of making the mask. Okay, so we talked about the fact that you could face a question where you've got a diagram. Yeah. How do we show costs on a diagram? Well, costs would be shown on the y-axis and the quantity on the x-axis. Try it. Just take the nearest piece of paper available. You can hear I've got a piece of paper here and I'm drawing a y-axis and I'm drawing an x-axis. For diagrams, it's not a good idea to make them small. They can fit a half a page even. But if I make my diagrams tiny, yeah, then is a problem. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call my y-axis cost. We normally call it price, but we're going to call it cost, and I'll call it cost in dollars. Yeah. And then my x-axis, I'm going to call it quantity. Yeah. Now, let's say I'm paying some rent. I've got a small shop. I'm paying some rent. I have to pay some insurances. So I will go to the y-axis and I'm going to start at let's say 3,000. Yeah. Now my 3,000 will correspond with the output 0. Yeah. Then as I go to output 100, my variable cost might be 2,000. Yeah. So what I do is I go to 2,000 and I plot where 100 corresponds with 2,000. Yeah. I'm going to be I'm going to take an easy route and I'm going to make a straight line graph. So I've got 2 points. Yeah. So I go from the one point where it is north 3,000. I made a little X there, and then I go to the point where it is 105,000 because I said my variable costs were an additional 2,000. Yeah, and what I do is I draw a straight line moving upwards, and I call it total cost. Now, my total cost is a combination of my fixed cost and my variable cost. Now, if I start from the origin and I draw a parallel line, yeah, then I could have my my total variable cost. If I take a line horizontal from the 3000, then I have my total fixed cost. Yeah, it's taken me, wow, some three, yeah, 3 minutes to draw a diagram on total cost, total variable cost, total fixed cost. On this slide, there will also be an example, which will come in at some point. Revenue. Okay, so we looked at cost. Now, what is revenue? Well, revenue is price times quantity. I take a bread, I sell it for €1. 1 times 1 is €1. It is my revenue. I take 2 breads and I sell them each at €1. 2 times 1 is €2. This is my revenue. I take 1,000 loaves of bread. I sell them at €1. I've made €1,000. Revenue is your sales. So, total revenue. I add up all the things that I have sold. If I want my average revenue, I take up the total of revenue and I divide it by the unit. Now, if my total revenue is the price times the quantity of everything I sold, then it's not a difficult concept, isn't it? So total revenue price times quantity. If I am given the total revenue, and I'm told the number of outputs, I would get average revenue. But isn't that price? So total revenue, average revenue. Okay, objectives of the firm. I recorded. Well, I didn't record. I was making as if I recorded, and then I realized I did not press the recording button. Big mistake. So let me try again. In order to survive. Survival. Yesterday I went to the supermarket and I bought some sparkling water and decided I wanted some hot food, so I went to the takeaway. Now, this poor takeaway, because of the lockdown regulations, cannot let people go inside, so I had to stand outside in the cold, and I made my order. I paid for my order, and they brought me a takeaway. Now, not far from here is a Greek restaurant. They're also selling of takeaways. Not far from here is an Indian restaurant. They are also selling takeaways. It's not a these are not traditionally takeaway shops. These are sit-down restaurants. And around Germany, especially, you're seeing that normal hotels and restaurants, in order to survive, they are selling of takeaways. When a business is new, you need to build up reputation, you need to build up market presence, and within the first 6 months, you're looking to meet break even, a point from which you can start making profit so that you can recover your losses. Maybe after a year and a half, you may be strong enough to be an established firm, but a lot of firms will fail. So they're thinking of survival. I want to be here next year. when becomes a recession? Recession, the global economy is going down. Big firms and small firms will be thinking, let us survive the recession. Sometimes you see the big firms cut down factories. They close the factories. They say, people, I'm sorry, you've got to go now. And they really become lean to survive something like a global recession. Moving upwards, social responsibility. If I open a business, it's not my job to torture bunnies and kill the fishes in the sea. If you think of beauty without cruelty, when they make their makeups, they don't test them on little bunny rabbits. They sell something that's made without cruelty. The same thing, packaging. I don't know if I'm going to get one, but I saw the idea of a bamboo toothbrush. It must be better than a plastic toothbrush. Yeah. So there's firms out there that are thinking of the environment. Also, a lot of the time they're thinking of their communities, so they're giving to charities and doing good things. Some firms just want to be the biggest. They want to grow. They've grown. They maybe start in a city, and then they go nationally, then maybe go internationally, so they can have the biggest of market share. Some may just want to maximize sales revenue. Yeah, if I'm selling a lot, then a lot of people know my product. If a lot of people know my product, then maybe other people will test my product, try my product, and then they get used to my product and they get brand loyalty and they stay with me. Of course, one of the main objectives is profit maximization. We want our total revenue to become high and our total cost to become lower. So that I have maximized my profit. Yeah, I'm selling relatively high, and I'm keeping my costs down. Objectives of a firm. Profit maximization. So profit is total revenue minus total costs. Most firms are of the objective of profit maximization, and they would produce at a point where the difference between total revenue and total cost is maximum. An example of a table, I have my output of 100, 200, 300, 400, and if I've got sales, total revenue of 2,000, but we mentioned in the beginning we might be wanting to survive, and I might be doing a lot of advertising or something, and then to produce 100, when I compare my total cost to my total revenue, I'm in a negative. When I produce 200 units in this particular example, I've met break even. Yeah, my total revenue minus my total cost gives me a profit of 0. As you can see, I am maximizing at the output of 400. This is where my total profit is maximized. So at 400 units, my total revenue is 6,000, my total cost is 5,400, and we have a profit of 600, which you can see is the maximum of all the profits in the profit column. Right, so here we've got sales revenue maximization. The firms will try to generate as much total revenue as possible. The next one is growth. Firms want to become the largest in the market for a greater market share. Idea of social responsibility, doing some charity work or some work for social benefit. The firms may support environmentally friendly processed products. I have seen Coca-Cola sponsoring schools in developing countries. Yeah, that is a good aim. Also, giving scholarships to people and donating to charities. Also, firms may support the environment by using environmentally friendly processes and changing their products to be more environmentally friendly. Last thing we look at is survival. Yeah, starting a business can be difficult. Yes, there will be a lot of costs, a lot of setup costs. Um, you have to build a client base, so you could be in a loss situation until you reach break even. Um, but while you're starting your business, you have to advertise your business. So if you want a business to do well, you have to put money into it. Um, you will be facing competition. You might be facing changing in spending patterns. Unfortunately, they're saying in Germany and possibly throughout the world, a lot of small businesses are not going to survive due to the COVID restrictions, yeah, which are causing them to lose sales. Um, So when does survival really important? It's when you're starting your business or often when there is a recession, when the economy is going down.